The evening was wrapped in elegance from the very beginning. The hotel where the dinner was being held was one of the most luxurious in the city, its tall glass windows glowing against the night sky like a jewel. Inside, the grand hall sparkled, with chandeliers that threw golden light across the polished marble floors. Round tables covered in white linen were arranged carefully, each decorated with tall vases of fresh flowers and shining silverware. Soft music played in the background, the sound of a piano drifting smoothly through the air. Guests in fine suits and glittering dresses filled the room, talking quietly as they waited for the night's most important guest to arrive. The dinner had been arranged to honor a Japanese tycoon, a man of great wealth and influence, who was known not only for his success in business, but also for his wisdom and generosity. For weeks, invitations had been sent out, and everyone who mattered in the city wanted to be there. Politicians, investors, and well-known social figures took their seats, eager to hear the tycoon speak. For many of them, this was more than a dinner, was an opportunity to connect, to impress, and maybe even to form partnerships that could change their lives. The waiters moved gracefully between the tables, carrying trays of sparkling water and wine, making sure every glass was full. Among them was a black waitress named Angela. She had worked at the hotel for years, known for her professionalism and kindness. She was not wealthy like the guests she served, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her daughter, a bright young girl named Maya, sat quietly in a chair near the back of the room. Angela had no one to look after Maya that evening, so she had brought her along, hoping she would stay unnoticed. Maya kept herself occupied with a small notebook and pen, sketching the flowers on the tables and watching everything with wide, curious eyes. The air was thick with anticipation. Conversations circled around the same topic, the Japanese tycoon. Some spoke about his achievements, others about his rumored generosity, and some whispered about what kind of opportunities his presence might bring. A sense of importance filled the room, and even the richest guests seemed nervous, as if they were about to meet a legend. The hall grew quieter as the hotel manager walked to the stage and tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice steady but full of excitement. "Please welcome our guest of honor, Mr. Sato, the distinguished tycoon from Japan." The doors at the far end opened, and Mr. Sato entered. He was not dressed in the flashiest clothes like some of the other guests, but his presence was commanding. His suit was simple yet elegant, his steps calm, his posture strong. He bowed slightly as he entered, a gesture of respect, and the entire room rose to its feet to applaud. As he walked to the front table, people whispered about him, about how his businesses had changed industries, about the charity work he had done, about the wisdom he often shared in interviews. Everyone expected his words tonight to be memorable, something that would inspire them or perhaps guide them in their own lives. Dinner was served soon after he was seated. Plates of steaming dishes arrived, one after another, beautifully arranged. With care, the smell of roasted meats, delicate soups, and exotic spices filled the air. Crystal glasses clinked as toasts were made, and laughter rippled through the hall. On the surface, it looked like the perfect evening gathering of success, power, and celebration. But beneath the glitter and the glow, there was a quiet tension. Many of the guests did not speak Japanese, and though they assumed the tycoon would use an interpreter, no one had seen one that night. Still, they pushed the thought aside. They were sure everything would go smoothly. Angela noticed the small details others overlooked. She saw the nervous tapping of fingers against the tablecloths, the way guests adjusted their ties and jewelry as if preparing to impress. She saw the eagerness in their eyes as they watched Mr. Sato, waiting for the moment he would rise to speak. And she also noticed her daughter, sitting at the back, watching the scene unfold with fascination. Maya's eyes seemed to follow every movement of the tycoon, her pencil pausing in her notebook as if she already sensed something important was about to happen. The room glowed with wealth and power. But for Angela and Maya, the night was about more than glittering chandeliers and expensive dresses. For them, it was about being present in a moment that felt bigger than themselves. A moment that might carry a story they would remember forever. The clinking of glasses grew softer. The music faded, and all eyes turned toward the front as Mr. Sato stood. The air thickened with expectation. Guests leaned forward in their seats, ready to catch every word. No one knew yet that within minutes, confusion would replace their smiles. And the voice that would save the evening wouldn't come from one of the wealthy guests, but from a young girl sitting quietly at the back of the room. The moment had finally arrived. The grand doors of the dining hall opened, and the soft music playing in the background faded into silence. Every head in the room turned at once. The air seemed to pause, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The Japanese tycoon entered, his steps calm, his presence commanding. Mr. Sato was not like the other men at the dinner. He wasn't covered in gold watches or flashy rings, nor did he wear a suit meant to scream attention. His suit was dark, perfectly tailored, but modest. His hair was neatly combed back, streaked with gray that added to his dignity rather than subtracting from it. His eyes were sharp, yet kind, and when he looked around the room, it was with respect, not arrogance. Even his bow, slight but meaningful, carried more weight than any grand speech. It told everyone present, "I honor you by being here. And I ask for the same honor in return." The applause that followed him was polite at first, then stronger as the guests tried to outdo one another in showing appreciation. Some clapped eagerly, hoping to catch his eye. Others smiled too wide, already imagining the benefits of being noticed by such a powerful man. But Mr. Sato didn't rush to his seat. He walked slowly, greeting people with a nod here, a slight smile there, as if to remind them that he saw them as individuals, not just a crowd. Angela, the black waitress working quietly along the edges of the room, noticed something the others didn't. While most of the guests were eager, almost desperate to impress, Mr. Sato seemed unimpressed by their display. He wasn't looking for shallow admiration. He was searching for something deeper: understanding, sincerity. Her daughter Maya noticed too. From her small chair at the back, she watched the tycoon with wide eyes, sensing that he carried more than just wealth into the room. He carried a story. When Mr. Sato reached his seat at the main table, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations hushed into whispers. Forks and knives rested on plates, and the guests leaned forward, hungry for his presence. To them, he was not just a man. He was an opportunity, a gateway to connections and perhaps even fortunes. Dinner began with a flourish. Dishes were brought out one by one: steaming bowls of soup, plates of roasted meats, and colorful arrays of vegetables. Crystal glasses sparkled as they were filled with wine. Guests ate and spoke in careful tones, each one pretending to be relaxed but clearly waiting for the main event: Mr. Sato's speech. The tycoon ate quietly, savoring each bite with patience. He did not rush, nor did he fill the silence with meaningless chatter. His calmness made others restless. They wanted to know what he had to say, what wisdom he would share, and, most importantly, how they might benefit from it. Finally, when the last dish of the main course had been cleared, Mr. Sato stood. The room fell into complete silence. Chairs creaked as people shifted, eager to lean forward and catch his every word. Angela stopped mid-step, her tray balanced carefully in her hands, her heart beating a little faster. Maya set down her pencil, her eyes locked on the man at the front. Mr. Sato began to speak. His voice was deep, steady, and filled with meaning. But he spoke in Japanese, not broken English, not the common phrases people expected. His words flowed entirely in his native language. His sentences were smooth, like poetry, each word carrying weight. His hands moved gently as he spoke, his eyes alive with emotion. At first, the guests listened politely, nodding as if they understood. But within seconds, the truth became clear. They didn't understand a single word. Faces froze in polite smiles, but their eyes revealed panic. A few glanced around nervously, hoping someone else might translate. Whispers began to spread across the tables. "Do you know what he's saying? Where's the interpreter? I thought someone arranged one." The silence of respect began to twist into silence of confusion. The tycoon continued speaking with passion, unaware of the blank stares facing him. To him, his words carried deep meaning, stories of resilience, generosity, and lessons from his journey. To the guests, it was an elegant puzzle they could not solve. Angela watched closely. She saw the unease on the faces of men who were usually confident. She saw the embarrassment of women who usually controlled every conversation. They were all lost, yet Mr. Sato didn't slow down, didn't falter. His belief in his message was so strong that he poured his heart into every word, convinced it mattered. And it did. They just couldn't hear it. Maya's small hands tightened around her notebook. Her eyes widened as she listened, and her lips moved slightly, repeating his words. She understood him. She had studied Japanese in school and through hours of online lessons, fascinated by the culture. For months, she had practiced quietly, never thinking it would matter. But now, in this hall filled with wealth and power, she realized she held a key no one else had. The tycoon spoke on, his voice growing stronger, his gestures broader. While the room grew heavier with discomfort, the guests were trapped between their desire to respect him and their frustration at not understanding. Every second made the gap wider. A room full of power and money was suddenly powerless. Silenced by language, and at the back of the room, unnoticed by almost everyone, sat a young girl who understood every single word. Asterisk. The room that had begun the evening filled with elegance and anticipation was now wrapped in unease. Mr. Sato's voice carried across the hall like a steady river, calm, powerful, and filled with meaning, but it was a river no one else knew how to cross. The guests, dressed in their finest clothes and armed with polished smiles, suddenly looked small in their seats. At first, they tried to maintain their composure. Some nodded politely, pretending to understand. A man in a dark suit even whispered, "Brilliant, absolutely brilliant," though he hadn't understood a word. A woman across from him forced a laugh at one of Mr. Sato's pauses, guessing it might have been a joke. But the act couldn't last. Soon the truth began to reveal itself. No one in the room understood the Japanese tycoon. An awkward energy spread like a ripple through water. Glasses clinked nervously as guests sipped wine to hide their confusion. A few coughed softly, the sound bouncing uncomfortably in the silence between Mr. Sato's words. The longer he spoke, the more restless the crowd became. People exchanged glances, raised eyebrows, small shrugs, helpless looks that said, "Do you know what he's saying? Because I don't." A politician near the front shifted in his seat, leaning toward the man beside him. "Didn't they hire a translator for tonight?" he whispered urgently. The man shook his head, his eyes wide. "I thought someone else was handling that." The whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the tables. But none of the guests wanted to be the one to interrupt. They were wealthy, powerful, and important in their own right, but in that moment, they felt powerless to interrupt. Mr. Sato would be disrespectful, and none of them wanted to risk insulting a man whose wealth and influence could open doors for them. So they sat, trapped between politeness and frustration, caught in the silence of not knowing. Mr. Sato, meanwhile, continued with passion. His hands moved gracefully, painting images in the air. His voice rose and fell like music, filled with conviction. He was telling them about the journey of his life, the struggles he had faced, the lessons he had learned, and the importance of humility in success. Every sentence carried weight. Every word was chosen carefully. He believed his message was reaching them, but it wasn't. His wisdom was floating above their heads, beautiful yet unreachable. Angela, moving quietly between tables with a tray in her hands, saw everything. She saw the frozen smiles of the guests, the way their eyes darted nervously toward each other, the way they fidgeted with their forks and napkins. She felt the tension rising, heavier with every minute. But what struck her most was her daughter. Maya, the little girl, sat at the back, her eyes wide, her lips moving silently as if repeating the words. Angela paused, watching closely. Could it be? Did Maya really understand? The thought seemed impossible, but Angela remembered the hours Maya had spent watching Japanese shows online, reading books and practicing phrases in front of the mirror. Her daughter's fascination with the language had always seemed like a hobby, something small, something for herself. But now, in this room full of powerful people who understood nothing, Maya's hobby was a lifeline. Back at the tables, the unease grew heavier. One guest finally muttered, "This is embarrassing." Another sighed, "All this effort for nothing. What's the point if we don't understand him?" A few even began to check their watches as if ready to leave. The elegance of the dinner was unraveling quickly, and with it, the respect they had hoped to show their guest of honor. And yet, Mr. Sato didn't notice. Or perhaps he noticed, but didn't let it stop him. His eyes shone as he spoke of respect, of perseverance, of how true success comes not from wealth, but from kindness. His words carried wisdom that could have inspired every person in the room, but instead, they sat in confusion, unable to grasp the gift being offered. It was almost painful to watch. The man with so much to share stood pouring his heart out, while his audience sat lost in silence. The disconnect was stark, like a singer performing a beautiful song to an audience that was deaf to the melody. Maya's hands tightened around her notebook. She understood every word. She could hear the meaning, the rhythm, the truth of what Mr. Sato was saying. It stirred something inside, hers, something bigger than fear, bigger than hesitation. She looked at her mother, her eyes pleading, as if to say, "I can help, let me help." Angela's heart raced. She knew her daughter had a gift, but this was not an ordinary stage. This was a hall filled with powerful people, people who might not take kindly to being saved by a child. And yet, the silence in the room screamed louder than anything. The dinner was falling apart, and no one could fix it, no one but Maya. As Mr. Sato continued, his words rich with emotion, Maya sat straighter in her chair. The guests shifted uncomfortably, still trapped in their confusion, still too proud to admit they were lost. The moment hung in the air like a fragile glass about to shatter. And in that fragile silence, a decision was forming, one that would change the entire course of the evening. Angela had worked hundreds of events in her life: weddings, banquets, political dinners, charity galas. She was used to moving like a shadow, always present but never noticed, her tray steady, her smile polite, her steps quiet. She had learned long ago that the wealthy liked their servers invisible. Tonight was no different, at least on the surface. The chandeliers sparkled, the guests glittered, and she moved silently among them, pouring drinks, clearing plates, adjusting cutlery. But while the guests pretended to listen and understand the Japanese tycoon, Angela could see the truth. She noticed details others overlooked. She saw the stiff smiles that didn't reach the eyes. She caught the restless fingers drumming lightly against the tablecloths. She saw men shifting in their chairs and women glancing toward the door as if searching for an escape. To anyone else, it looked like a polite audience listening intently. To Angela, who had spent years reading body language as part of her job. It was clear the room was unraveling. Mr. Sato spoke with a voice filled with conviction, his gestures calm and measured. He looked at the guests as though he were sharing something precious, something meant to inspire them. And perhaps it would have, if anyone had understood. But Angela could feel the disconnect. It was like watching two different plays at the same time, one man speaking with heart, and a room full of people wearing masks of understanding but drowning in confusion. Angela's eyes drifted toward the back of the room, where Maya sat quietly. With her little notebook, her daughter was supposed to be invisible tonight too. Angela had brought her only because she had no other choice. Babysitters were expensive, and her shift was too important to miss. So she had told Maya to stay put, to keep herself busy, and to stay out of sight. But Maya was not simply sitting. Her eyes were fixed on Mr. Sato, wide and unblinking. Her lips moved silently, almost in rhythm with his words. Angela frowned, pausing in her steps. Was she? Repeating him. Angela leaned slightly, pretending to adjust the glasses on her tray. But really, she was watching her daughter, and then it hit her. Maya wasn't just mouthing random words, she was understanding him. Angela's heart skipped. She remembered the late nights when she'd peeked into Maya's room to find her watching Japanese shows online, repeating phrases until her accent grew sharper. She remembered the afternoons when Maya scribbled strange characters in her notebook, explaining that they were hiragana and kanji. Angela had always admired her daughter's dedication, but she had never thought it would mean much. It was a hobby, something her little girl loved, like other children loved sports or drawing. But tonight, in this glittering hall full of people, with money and influence, that hobby suddenly mattered more than anything. Angela returned to her work, refilling a glass of wine, setting down a plate. But her eyes kept darting back to her daughter. The guests were beginning to whisper more openly now. Some of their masks were cracking. She overheard one man mutter, "What's the point of this if we can't understand?" Another sighed, shaking his head. A woman rolled her eyes and whispered, "This is a waste of time." Their arrogance filled the air, thick and ugly. And Angela felt a sting of pity for Mr. Sato. Here was a man pouring out his heart, speaking with honesty and dignity, and not one of them had the humility to admit they were lost. Maya's hands tightened on her notebook. Her eyes darted to her mother, full of urgency, almost pleading. Angela's chest tightened. She knew what her daughter wanted to do. She knew the thought blooming inside her little girl's mind. I can help. I can fix this. But Angela hesitated. The guests were powerful, wealthy people. They wouldn't welcome interruption from a waitress, let alone a child. These were people who measured respect in titles, status, and money. They might laugh, they might dismiss Maya, or worse, insult her for daring to speak. The thought of her daughter being humiliated in front of such a crowd made Angela's stomach twist. And yet, she could also see the truth. No one else in the room could help. No translator had been arranged. No guest had the knowledge. The dinner was collapsing before her eyes, and the one person who could save it was her daughter, sitting quietly at the back of the room. Waiting for permission, Angela poured another glass, her hands steady even as her heart raced. She looked, and Mr. Sato, still speaking with passion, still unaware that his message was lost. She looked at the guests, fidgeting with discomfort. And finally, she looked at Maya, whose eyes shone with determination far bigger than her years. In that moment, Angela realized something. Her daughter wasn't just a child with a hobby. She was a bridge between cultures, between languages, between worlds. And maybe, just maybe, tonight was the night for that bridge to be seen. Angela gave the smallest of nods, barely moving her head, but it was enough. Maya's eyes widened in recognition. Her mother had given her permission. Her chance had come, and so while the guests sat drowning in confusion and Mr. Sato's words hung in the air like unsolved riddles, a quiet waitress and her daughter prepared to change the course of the entire evening. Asterisk. The silence in the room had grown unbearable. Mr. Sato's words poured out like poetry, rich and meaningful, but to the guests they were only sounds without sense. Their forced smiles had begun to fade, their masks of politeness slipping away. Some fidgeted with napkins, others leaned back in frustration. A dinner meant to honor a great man was turning into an embarrassment. At the back of the room, Maya's small hands tightened around her notebook. She wasn't confused like the others. She wasn't restless or bored. Every word Mr. Sato spoke reached her clearly, as if he were speaking directly to her. She had studied Japanese for years, not in classrooms, not with expensive tutors, but with passion and persistence. She had watched endless videos, listened to songs, and copied characters late into the night. She had practiced until her tongue could shape the sounds correctly, and her ears could catch the rhythm of the language. Now, in this hall of wealth and power, her hidden gift burned inside her, waiting to be used. She looked around the room at the men in their sharp suits, the women in glittering gowns, all of them helpless in their ignorance. Then she looked at her mother, Angela, moving gracefully with her tray, her face calm, but her eyes sharp. Their eyes met, and Maya's heart thudded. She mouthed the words silently. "I understand him." Angela froze for just a moment. Her tray balanced perfectly, as though it were part of her. She had suspected as much, but hearing her daughter confirm, it even silently made her pulse quicken. She looked at Maya's determined face and felt a wave of fear and pride crash together inside her. Fear, because she knew how cruel wealthy people could be when their pride was bruised. Pride, because she knew her daughter held something no one else in the room did, the ability to bridge the silence. Maya's chest rose and fell quickly. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She was only a child in a room, full of adults who thought they were more important than anyone else. But she also knew she had something they didn't. She could hear Mr. Sato's story. And it was too beautiful, too powerful, to remain trapped in confusion. Her mother gave her a single, subtle nod. It was small, almost invisible to the room. But to Maya, it felt like a green light shining in the dark. Her breath caught, her throat dry. But she pushed her notebook aside and stood. The scrape of her chair against the floor was quiet. Yet it seemed to echo louder than the whispers in the hall. Heads turned. A child standing up in a gathering like this was unusual enough to draw attention. Some guests frowned, annoyed by the interruption. Others looked curious, raising eyebrows as if to ask, "What is she doing?" Maya's knees shook, but she straightened her back. Her voice was small at first, uncertain, but steady. He began, and immediately the room fell into silence. Dozens of eyes stared at her, but she pressed on, her words gaining strength. He said success is not measured by money, but by kindness. He said wealth is only valuable when it is used to help others. The guests blinked in shock. For the first time all night, Mr. Sato's message reached them. Whispers swept through. The crowd, not of confusion now, but of astonishment, Maya continued, her confidence growing with every word. She listened to Mr. Sato speak, then translated his sentences into English with surprising clarity. Her voice carried through the hall, not loud, but strong enough to fill every corner. Each phrase was smooth, her accent precise, her delivery respectful. The Tycoon stopped mid-sentence when he realized what was happening. His eyes found Maya at the back of the room, and for a moment the corners of his lips lifted in a gentle smile. He nodded slightly, acknowledging her, encouraging her to continue. With that smile, Maya's fear melted away. She felt as though she and Mr. Sato were the only two people in the room, sharing a secret no one else had been able to touch. Every word he spoke, she carried to the guests, and slowly the atmosphere transformed. The restlessness faded. The arrogance drained from their faces. People leaned forward, captivated by the meaning they had been missing. Instead of rolling eyes and forced smiles, there was now genuine respect. For Mr. Sato, for his wisdom, and for the young girl who had given his words life in their language, Angela watched with tears gathering in her eyes. Though she kept her posture professional, Maite saw her daughter standing there, small but mighty, holding the attention of people who would never have looked at her twice. Her chest swelled with pride, but also with relief. Maya was safe, not only safe, but shining. By the time Maya translated the final words of Mr. Sato's speech, the room erupted into applause. Not polite clapping, not the forced gestures of wealthy people trying to impress, but real, heartfelt applause. People looked at Maya with admiration, their earlier arrogance replaced by gratitude. The little girl who had walked into the hall unnoticed was now the center of it. Her hidden gift had turned the night from failure to triumph, from confusion to connection, and for the first time in her life, Maya realized that her love for a language wasn't just a hobby. It was power, the kind of power that could change an entire room, even an entire world, if she was brave enough to use it. *4. A moment, the room seemed frozen in time. Maya's voice, small yet steady, had broken through the noise of whispers and awkwardness that had filled the grand hall. The applause from the guests had quieted now, but all eyes remained locked on her. Child in a world of adults, her hands slightly trembling at her sides. Her notebook still open on the chair she had left behind. Her heart raced so fast she thought it might leap from her chest, but she refused to sit back down. Something inside her told her this was her moment, and she had to be brave. Mr. Sato continued to speak in Japanese, his tone calm and filled with warmth. Every word seemed to invite Maya to step forward, to bring his message into the hearts of those who couldn't understand him. She swallowed hard, straightened her back, and spoke again, louder this time. He says, "People measure success with money, but true wealth is in the lives you touch and the kindness you show." The room stirred, heads turned. Guests leaned in closer, their curiosity now replaced with hunger to hear more. For the first time that night, they were not watching Mr. Sato in confusion. They were watching Maya, the little girl who had dared to stand where no one else could. Angela's chest tightened as she moved silently between tables. She wanted to run to her daughter, to shield her from the weight of so many powerful eyes, but she didn't. She knew this was a test of courage, and her daughter was meeting it with bravery far beyond her years. She caught Maya's gaze just once, offering the smallest smile. It was all Maya needed to steady herself. The Tycoon speech went on, and Maya translated each line. At first, her voice wavered like a flame in the wind, but as she spoke, confidence grew. The Japanese words that had once been whispered in her bedroom, late at night, now flowed effortlessly in front of an audience that had doubted her. She found her rhythm, listening, understanding, and carrying the meaning into English with grace. He says, "Power should never be used to silence others, but to lift them up." He says, "Wisdom is not learned in comfort, but in hardship." He says, "Respect is not demanded, it is earned through humility." With every phrase, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The arrogance that had filled the air earlier was gone. The guests who had once rolled their eyes were now sitting forward in their seats, nodding, whispering their amazement. Some even looked ashamed, realizing how close they had come to dismissing him, and how close they had come to missing something extraordinary. Mr. Sato's eyes remained on Maya as he spoke, his smile widening with pride. It was as though he had chosen her, even without knowing it, to carry his voice. He paused sometimes, giving her time to translate, and each time she did, he nodded approvingly. The respect in his gaze gave her courage, wrapping around her like a shield. At one point, crystal glasses clinked as a man at the front raised his drink, murmuring, "Remarkable." A woman in pearls whispered, "She's extraordinary," loud enough for Angela to hear. The same people who might have dismissed Maya outside these walls were now admiring her as if she were the most important person in the room. But for Maya, the applause and admiration didn't matter. What mattered was the connection. She wasn't just repeating words, she was carrying meaning. She was building a bridge between Mr. Sato and the audience, stitching together two worlds that had been separated by silence. And with each sentence, her fear melted away, replaced by a deep, steady fire. Still, the weight of the moment was heavy. Maya was aware of how unusual it was, how unlikely it was that a waitress's daughter was standing here, translating for a tycoon in front of the city's elite. She felt the pressure, but instead of crushing her, it lifted her higher. Her courage came not from wanting to be seen, but from knowing it was the right thing to do. Angela watched, her eyes shimmering with tears she fought to hold back. This was the daughter she had raised, quiet, curious, full of hidden strength. The world had never paid attention to her before, but tonight they had no choice. Tonight, her daughter's courage was rewriting the entire evening. Mr. Sato's final words came like a gentle conclusion. His voice softer now, almost like a blessing. Maya translated them clearly, her voice steady and bright. He says, "Success is not what you take from the world, but what you give back." And tonight, he is grateful to be among people who he hopes will remember this. The room erupted in applause, louder and stronger than before. Guests rose to their feet, clapping. Not only for Mr. Sato, but for the girl who had carried his words into their hearts. Maya's cheeks burned with color, her hands trembling. But she bowed her head slightly, imitating the respectful gesture she had seen the tycoon make when he first entered. It was an act of courage that no one had expected. A girl who had started the night as invisible had transformed into the voice that saved it. She had stepped into the silence, filled it with bravery, and changed the way every person in that room would remember the evening. Angela, standing at the edge of the crowd, whispered under her breath, "That's my daughter." Her heart swelled with pride, knowing Maya had found her voice and used it when it mattered most. Asterisk for a long moment. After Maya finished translating Mr. Sato's final words, the room was completely silent. It was not the silence of confusion. Anymore it was the silence of awe. The kind of stillness that comes when people are shaken out of their pride and forced to see something bigger than themselves. Then, slowly at first, the sound of applause filled the hall. One table clapped, then another, until the entire room was standing, their hands striking together in thunderous approval. The applause was not just for Mr. Sato, though he bowed his head humbly in acknowledgement. It was for the little girl who had transformed the night. Maya, who had been invisible only an hour earlier, now stood as the bridge between a man of wisdom and a room full of people who thought they knew everything. Respect, genuine and unforced, spread across the faces of men and women who had once sat restless and dismissive. Some of the guests whispered to one another, their voices laced with amazement. "Who is she?" one asked. "That's the waitress's daughter," another replied, shaking their head in disbelief. Incredible. For people who measured value in money, connections, and status, it was shocking that the hero of the evening was not one of them. But a child sitting at the back of the hall, Angela, still holding her tray, stood straighter than she had all night. Her heart swelled as she watched her daughter bow her head politely, copying the respectful gesture of the tycoon. She heard the murmurs ripple through the crowd, felt the shift in energy that now pulsed like a heartbeat. Across the room, The first time in her years of working in that hotel, Angela wasn't just a shadow moving between tables. She was the mother of the girl. Everyone was talking about the girl who had saved the evening. Mr. Sato looked directly at Maya, his eyes shining with warmth. He gave her a deep, respectful bow, and the entire room gasped softly at the gesture. It was rare for a man of such power and influence to bow so fully, and yet here he was, honoring a child. In that moment, everyone understood that he had not simply been heard, he had been understood. And that, to him, was worth more than their money or applause. Maya's cheeks burned as the guests continued clapping, some even smiling at her with admiration. A woman in a pearl necklace leaned toward her husband and said, "She's remarkable. Did you hear the way she spoke? So clear, so confident." Another man murmured, "I've never seen anything like it." Respect was spreading, not forced by wealth or position, but earned through courage. For the meaner souls in the room, the ones who had rolled their eyes earlier, the ones who had whispered about wasting their time, the shock was even greater. They had underestimated both Mr. Sato and the little girl. Now they sat quietly. Their pride stung, their arrogance softened. They could not dismiss what they had just witnessed. A child had succeeded where they had all failed, and they had no choice but to respect her for it. Angela noticed the way people now looked at her daughter, and it made her throat tighten. All her life, she had taught Maya to hold her head high, to be proud of who she was, even when the world tried to make her feel small. Tonight, Maya had done more than that. She had stood tall, not only for herself, but for her mother, for Mr. Sato, and for everyone who had ever been ignored or underestimated. The guests began approaching Maya after the applause settled, asking her questions, complimenting her, thanking her for her bravery. "Where did you learn Japanese?" someone asked. Maya answered shyly, "I studied on my own." "On your own?" The man repeated, his eyes wide. Respect grew even deeper. Knowing her gift was not the result of privilege, but of persistence. Mr. Sato stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of the entire hall once again. He spoke briefly, and Maya translated, "This young girl has shown us tonight that wisdom and courage are not about age, or money, or status. They are about the heart." I am honored to have been given a voice through her. Those words landed like thunder. People nodded, murmured in agreement, and some even looked ashamed at the way they had dismissed both the man and the child earlier in the evening. Respect filled the room, not only for Mr. Sato, but for Maya, whose bravery had lifted the evening out of disaster and into history. Angela's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She held her chin high, her pride swelling so large it felt like her chest might burst. For years, she had worked in silence, unnoticed, invisible to the powerful people she served. But tonight, it was her daughter who had commanded their respect. And in their respect for Maya, Angela felt seen too. The shock of the evening had turned into something far greater: respect, admiration, even inspiration. For many of the guests, it was a reminder that greatness often comes from unexpected places. That wisdom can flow through anyone, regardless of age, race, or social standing. And that sometimes the quietest voice in the room can be the most powerful of all. As the night drew on and conversations resumed, Maya remained at the center of it. She was no longer the child sitting unnoticed in the back. She was the girl who had given voice to a tycoon and reminded a room full of powerful people that respect must be earned, not demanded. And for everyone there, it was a night they would never forget.